We're back above 61, but I guess the world is waiting for an Israeli response to what Iran did to it the other day. And so now the market's on edge. Big question is, are we ever going to break out of this range? I mean, we've been in this range for over 200 days. And even though it feels like the worst is over, well, I don't know if we're going to get up above that range. That's why today I've got a panel of 3 of probably the smartest guests out there in crypto. And we're going to speak about when Bitcoin's going to break out of this range, if this attack or invasion actually even matters, and then we're going to talk about what altcoins they're actually buying. So it's Friday, it's a big banter today. Let's get going, guys. Lots to go, lots to do. All right, let's see. I just want to see how many days we've been going in the sideways movement for. Okay, we are now in day 219. And even though a lot of people are saying October is cancelled, I don't think October is cancelled. I think October is just going to play out exactly like it always plays out, where the pump actually only starts after about 11 or 10 or 11 days. Anyway, in the interim, we're all waiting to see what's going to happen next in the Israel, or markets are waiting to see what's going to happen next in this Israel-Iran conflict. And I guess that will determine which way Bitcoin goes. I think an attack, though, is, I would say, almost inevitable. The only thing is what happens after that. But I also think that probably an attack has already been priced in because there's been so much talk about it. Anyway, today's a Friday Banter. We're going to talk about a lot of things. We're going to talk about what the next move for the market is, when it's going to happen. We're going to talk about altcoins. We're going to talk about whether we should be holding Ethereum. But I must remind you that these Friday Banters are actually brought to you by NordVPN. If you don't already have a VPN, you have to get a VPN. You cannot be surfing unprotected and exposing your IP address because hackers will get into your computer. Governments will know exactly what DeFi applications you're using. You got to take security seriously. If you're in crypto and you want to make life-changing money, take security seriously. Don't end up making money and then lose it to a hacker or something like that, because that is absolutely criminal. So if you do want a VPN, sign up today. It's less than $3 a month. Literally less than $3 a month to protect yourself, to protect your crypto. I think that anybody in crypto must be doing this. The link is over here. Just scroll down below, click on that link and sign up with a VPN. All right, so with that out the way and all the formalities out the way, in fact, that's not all the formalities out the way. The last day today to get a big package and to get potentially a second big package for free. So today is the last day. So if you order a ledger today using the link below, and here's the link below. If you use this link over here and you order a ledger, you may get a second ledger absolutely free. And that's like getting $399 or $400. Today is the last day. So if you've been delaying, get a VPN, get a ledger, you're protected in crypto. All right, now with the formalities out the way, let's talk about what's actually going on out here. And I think the big question that everybody's asking is, are we ever going to break out over this range? And I think this is probably a good place to bring our guests in. Today, we've got 3 guests that you know very well. You got Jordy, you got Yat, you got 𝗬𝗫. Actually, as we were discussing in the room, just a bunch of great KOLs to have a discussion here. Great 3 or 4 key opinion leaders on a podcast today. Guys, since you are key opinion leaders, I do want to get your opinion. And this time I want to get your opinion about this chart that has just been going sideways and killing us all softly. Are any of you getting to the point now where you actually don't believe that this chart's going to continue, that we're not going to carry on with this 4-year cycle and that we're going to break into some kind of like Bitcoin run and altcoin run before the end of the year? Because I know the audience here is getting a little bit, what's the word? Despondent. Despondent is probably a good word. 𝗬𝗫, you're nodding. So, and since you are the most famous KOL here, maybe we should start there.
Well, thank you. As a key opinion leader, let me just listen my opinion here. Look, I think right now macro is in the driver's seat, and we can see that the whole situation going on in Israel now is driving a lot of trepidation in the markets. The same thing is true for a lot of risk assets in the S&P. So I don't think this is a crypto. I don't think crypto is the only asset class that's feeling this kind of risk-off situation. We've also got a pullback in macro because the expectation of the next interest rate cut has decreased in the sense that it's likely to be lower than 50 basis points again. So all of that is naturally going to weigh on markets, especially risky assets like crypto. But I think for the most part, the answer usually is just be patient. We had a 15-20% pullback, but for alts, and then for Bitcoin, it's down to 60K. It's not the end of the world. So I would say probably we should be patient, and expect that, the election is the big question mark with respect to how markets are going to react at this point.
So you say
else.
the election's the big question mark. Is it like black and white? So if Trump wins, good for Bitcoin, good for altcoins. If Kamala wins, bad for Bitcoin, bad for altcoins. Because we're not actually that far away from the elections. We're about 30 days away from the election. So like, how do you say the election's the big thing? What are you expecting? Let's quickly like play some like, let's say Kamala wins. What, does market go down? Does crypto go down? Or do we just stay where we're at? Trump wins, what happens?
So I think it actually depends a lot on what we've learned between now and the election about Kamala's stance toward crypto, which the reality is we really don't know that much yet. So we've had two kind of throwaway statements, none of which have really been made toward the American electorate. My suspicion is that we're going to hear more between now and the election. And I've heard from some folks who are in touch with Kamala's campaign team that Kamala has intentionally been mum about crypto. She doesn't want to say anything until much closer to the election. I don't know if this is true, and this is all hearsay, and so it's one of these things that for a question this momentous, I want to get more signal about how she actually feels about the industry. But all the signs that I have seen so far point in the direction of Kamala's probably going to be softer on crypto than she's letting on. I just think at this point, she's trying to play to the middle of the electorate, and the middle basically says, okay, you should be friendly toward crypto. She's not going to be Trump, but she's almost certainly going to be better than Biden at this point. So, but I actually think for the most part, although markets will do better if Trump wins than if Kamala wins, no doubt, I think markets will mostly just be glad to have the election behind us and just to remove some of that uncertainty, because the thing that markets hate more than anything is just uncertainty.
Okay.
I actually think that the true test for Kamala will be to see what actually happens with the SEC and really with Gensler's role. I think really that's probably going to be the test case to see what's going to happen. And my view though is that if she were to win, that I think it is going to be more of the same in terms of the industry will tick along, because when you think about what happened with FIT21 and SAB 121, actually I think crypto is becoming much more of a bipartisan issue. To me, there is a sort of underbelly effect that we're seeing in America, where Democrats basically had to break rank, as it were, because they were frankly not wanting to lose their seat, because their electorate has given them clear messages. So I think generally speaking, even if it may not feel this way, I think crypto is broadly going in the positive direction, just because what we're seeing essentially with the electorate, broadly speaking, right? And I think again, the two recent votes in Congress are a good indicator of that. Now, our industry is, however, very, very sentiment driven, unsurprisingly so. So obviously, if Trump were to win, then we're probably going to have much more of a rally. But I am not necessarily sure that rally is going to be sustained, because Trump hasn't shown to be consistent about things, right? And there's going to be other things going on there. So I think of essentially much more volatility when Trump is elected, just because it's much more narrative sentiment driven. Whereas I think with Kamala, it's going to feel a little bit more steady. But ultimately, whether it's through direct policies or even just leaving things as they are, I think we're going to be progressing broadly in the right direction in the U.S. just because of we're more, the more Americans own crypto, which is what's happening, the more the issue becomes bipartisan.
It feels like you can't really be fighting the tide. Like it feels like the tide is that crypto is kind of taking over, and you can kind of resist it for like a period of time. But even with Kamala, I don't think that they'll be able to resist it for very much longer. Jordi, I think I get the feeling that you're slightly more the trader in the group here, and so you're probably taking these guys are VC KOLs. They're not normal KOLs. They're VC KOLs, and so they're making very early
Different
stages.
kinds of KOLs that you're distinguishing now. Okay, got it.
Guys, just for those people in the audience, that in the backstage, we were just talking about whether or not 𝗪𝗓𝗄 is a KOL, because 𝗪𝗓𝗄 called Jordi a KOL. And I said, if 𝗪𝗓𝗄's talking at conferences and has an opinion and has influence, he's definitely a KOL. So that's where it came from. But Jordi, on a serious note, so you're looking at this market a little bit more shorter term. You're looking at the trades. You're looking at the sentiment. What's driving this market? Is it liquidity? Is it China? Is it elections? What's keeping crypto down, and what's sending the S&P up to all-time highs?
I mean, definitely last week the China news was massive. I think for all of markets, was just like such a relief to finally have China throw in the towel and say, okay, guys, it's gone too far. We're going to kind of backstop the equity market here. Unfortunately, we get the war situation right after, and with everything at all-time highs, it was kind of inevitable that we would have some choppiness. The thing that has surprised me is that there's just like nonstop new coins. Like I just see every day like new Ethereum coins from the ICO getting sold. Like there's an extra 50 million of ICO coins every day, it seems like. This has been a bit surprising. In terms of the election, I think it's not priced in for the upside. I think if Kamala wins, we kind of stay where we are. And if Trump wins, we go up a lot. So
if Trump wins, if Trump wins, would you say $125,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year is reasonable? And the reason why I ask is because if you just take the average Q4 returns for Bitcoin, it's 88%. And if we go up 88% from here, we're talking about $125,000 Bitcoin, depending on which way you look at it. So if Trump wins, like, would you say that $125,000 Bitcoin kind of feels realistic?
No, I think the notional is too big, right? It's different if it's like 10K Bitcoin goes to 20K. I think it's not going to move that much. But can we see like 80, 90K, and then, you know, once inauguration happens, we kind of blow through 100? I think that's quite reasonable. And it's 50-50. Like we could get this, like worst case scenario, maybe alts bleed a tiny bit more, and, you know, people get a little bit frustrated that we're chopping around. But I don't think we can get much lower, because at the end of the day, Kamala is going to be good for stocks. They're still going to print money. Democrats print more money. I mean, depends. Every administration is different, but Kamala is not going to be fiscally responsible. And if anything, like stocks do better under Kamala because there's less trade, you know, tensions going on. So I think it's kind of a win-win. Like either it's like a free roll. That's the way to put it. It's a free roll.
Okay. Okay.
Why
So
do you
I mean,
think that stocks will do better under Kamala?
That's kind of like the TradFi expectation right now. They think that Trump might start trade wars again and kind of do like protectionist stuff, while Kamala is just gonna just do all kinds of money printing.
I must say, I think that if you look at history, the markets did very, very much better under Trump in terms of if you just remove COVID stimulus out the way and you look at Democrats versus Republicans, the markets did much better under a Trump rule. You mentioned China. This is the snapshot of the Chinese market. With the announcements that they've made in the last couple of days, they've erased all losses for the last 12 months, so to speak. So the markets are back to where they were 12 months ago. Do you think that this is sustainable? Do you think that we're getting another COVID-style pump from China? Or do you think this is just like a short-term spike and then, you know, we kind of correct and go straight back down again?
I mean, I think the one thing, if you look at China, what they don't like is volatility, generally speaking. I mean, the whole principle of China is essentially how to sort of create a more harmonious society, broadly speaking. So any type of volatility is disruptive. So they don't really want a pump, right? So in other words, if there will be a pump or some effect of that, they're going to try to dial that down. And we shouldn't forget that, of course, a lot of the attention really that a lot of people are focusing on are really sort of the big caps anyway, right? So we're not seeing the trickle-down effect at this moment in time where people are saying, oh, okay, we should start plowing into the market and basically broadly sort of support, all sorts of companies. It's really going to go basically into the largest entities first, which is, natural because people want to play it safe. And that's actually really, I think it's a signaling. I think China is trying to play it safe. But they also, I think the West, the markets outside of China are reading it maybe a little bit more optimistically than the people in China are, because it's something that I think is expected and hoped for maybe, but it's not something that I think is going to have the kind of impact that I think the West is thinking it will have, right?
Well, I think what Xi Jinping is also very sensitive to is foreign direct investment, which has fallen off a cliff in the last couple of years, right? So the perception that China is this rapidly growing economy, it's a great place to invest, everyone's going to make a bunch of money, that really eroded in the last year and a half. And that's apart from government action, and it's also just apart from the economy just exploding, right? Like a lot of these tech companies just getting cracked down on, education companies. stocks in China just feel like they've been down only for the last couple of years. So I do think that, to Yacht's point, although doing the stimulus doesn't solve mass youth unemployment, doesn't solve declining wages, doesn't solve a lot of obvious problems. From my perspective, a big part of the problem that it's meant to solve is to attract foreign capital back to China, just because that's been a large part of China's growth model for the last 20 years, has been being this just gigantic sponge for foreign direct investment. When Xi Jinping came to San Francisco to come make an appeal to U.S. investors and say, hey, invest in China again, it's great, everything's fine, we're very happy to receive foreign money. You don't do that unless it's very core to your mission. And so I think the fact that, yes, this is in some ways entreating foreign capital to come back into China and say, hey, look, our stock market doesn't only go down. I think it's clearly working, because I see more and more people talking about, like, oh, hey, maybe China is more investable than we gave it credit for, and we shouldn't just write the whole country off.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, I'm looking at the charts. I'm looking at the charts here right now, and I'm looking at specifically the Bitcoin dominance chart, because I think that gives us a feel for altcoins. And it looks like this thing's on an absolute rampage. I mean, the Bitcoin dominance just doesn't go down. It just feels like Bitcoin is overshadowing the whole market. So I think the question for me is, like, we're, I don't know, 13 years into this industry. Bitcoin is still 60% of everything that's out there in this industry that's listed, so to speak. Do you think that, like, this turns around now? I mean, we've got a whole lot of other protocols that are looking good. I mean, Solana's looking good, Sui's looking good. Do you think that we remain in this, like, 60% Bitcoin world, or do you think that we've, like, kind of topped there, and very soon we're going to get some kind of correction in the Bitcoin dominance and the altcoins take a run?
I mean, they're just different categories. Like, you shouldn't put them together. They're all tech coins except for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not trying to become better tech. I mean, yeah, maybe you get 𝗏𝗏, maybe you get a couple tiny improvements, some soft forks over time, but everything else is trying to be better. Like, nothing is set in stone like Bitcoin is. So it's just this, like, interesting micro asset that is competing for gold and competing for this central bank sort of limitation theory. Everything else is tech, and I think as venture KOLs here, like, there's a lot of focus on the best tech and what's going to be the new stuff. And I think Yaa was telling us some interesting ideas about, like, how to use the tech, and I love the tech stuff. Haseeb will laugh at me, but I even like the crypto AI stuff, which is kind of like a controversial topic. But just Bitcoin, Bitcoin dominance at this point, it means that gold is doing well relative to stocks, which we're seeing in the real world anyway. We're seeing that gold has rallied even during this last week. So Bitcoin dominance kind of makes sense.
But I mean, my view on this is that, really it has to do with the institutional backing that Bitcoin has relative to any other tokens out there. I mean, when you look at, for instance, the altcoin space, it actually has an aggregate increased as well by close to, like, $250 to $300 billion, for instance. However, it's been diluted by 2 million pump up fund tokens, amongst other things, right? So really what's happening is it's the attention that used to be only focused on a number of projects. Like, for instance, if you look at gaming tokens, 3 years ago, there were really only a handful of gaming tokens that you could really sort of partake in that were serious. And so all the attention went to a few of them. But now you have, like, hundreds of gaming tokens, and you have millions of meme coins, and so in aggregate the value is higher, and the volume is higher, but actually per project it seems actually that they're not doing as well relative to Bitcoin, whereas Bitcoin does stand in a category of its own, has the biggest institutional backing. Our view is that institutional support for essentially tokens is going to become much more important. And if you take a look at, for instance, the ones that have stood out more in the market, whether this is a TON or Solana or even Ethereum, actually they're the ones that do capture institutional interest, from a liquid standpoint, which, they'll never invest in a meme coin, for instance, or even for certain game coins, it's hard for them to understand because they don't look at that. Eventually, I think this will bleed over, but we're at this point where, Bitcoin is essentially, to Jordi's point, it is a sort of in a class of its own, but it's, we think it's because of the institutional side of things, right? That, the other projects don't have. But that doesn't mean they're not going to sort of grow. It's just that, we're still early in the institutional game. And Bitcoin sort of ETFs really, I think, heralded that moment where people are waking up and saying, oh, what's this?
Okay,
We should look at that. And
okay,
now
so
it's bleeding over to other things slowly, right?
then, I mean, that seems like a good time to maybe talk about the other institutional coin, or what should be an institutional coin, because there is an ETF for it, which is, of course, ETH. You see that guy over there? That's me. Okay, that's me, right? I still have a little bag of ETH. Well, it was a big bag of ETH. It's not such a big bag of ETH anymore. What is the story with ETH? Like, what is the reason why the institutions don't like ETH? Can we write off ETH and just say, look, it's just not going to happen? It feels like the sentiment is very, very, very much away from ETH at the moment. I sent some prominent VCs a deck the other day for a company capturing the MEV on ETH. And the response that I got was, no, thank you. We've lost all conviction in ETH. We're not investing in anything on ETH. I mean, you frown, but I mean, these are big multi-coin investors that we speak of.
Multi-coin investors, you say? Wow. Okay.
It might be a multi-coin investor. Yeah.
Yeah.
These are investors that are investing in multi-coins. I mean, what is the thesis on ETH? Is there any thesis to continue holding the ETH? Jordi, I know you and I had a discussion when we were in Singapore, and I said, I wanted to switch my ETH for Celestia. And you kind of said, no, you don't do that. It's like, it's not the right trade. Like, what is the thesis? Should I just carry on holding my ETH? Or 𝗪𝗂, I haven't heard your view. What should I do? Should I carry on holding my ETH, or should I just dump it back?
I'm not a trading KOL. You should ask the trading KOL.
No, I'm not trading. I'm investing. I don't trade. I just invest.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I mean,
go ahead,
that's the thing. The only thing I'll say is obviously that there's a huge unlock coming this month, and as we are seeing, like it's gonna weigh on the price. And any VC that's gonna come and like tweet about how it's great tech and whatever, it's just irrelevant when you literally double the market cap in one foul sweep, and you don't want to be holding tokens during that. You can hold it later,
Let's go back. We'll talk about the Celestia discussion just now, but let's talk about the ETH discussion, because I think that's common to a lot of people that are watching the show at the moment. ETH.
So
are we still bullish? Like, I mean, it is an institutional asset. There's an ETF. People can literally, no one buys the ETF, but I mean, there is an ETF.
Okay, so first of all, I think the ETF will be much more attractive when actually staking yields can actually be sort of create a yield generating ETF, which I think is there's a debate and discussion going on around that, I guess. So I think from an institutional side, that becomes more attractive. But really, the way that we would think of this, and I'm certainly long-term bullish on ETH, and it's not because of the price, which is only one indicator, but it's about the kind of networks that are being constructed on ETH. And basically, when you think about all the sort of L2s and all of the developers going on top of it, that's actually what we care to look for. And when we talk about sort of Jordi's point about sort of tech or tech VC KOLs, the perspective really comes down to whether technology or whether the frameworks or whether the users on the network are actually creating compound network effects of the ability to do so. And ETH has that ability.
But what is like, respectfully, what is the network or the technological developments that are happening on top of ETH? Because all I see happening on top of ETH.
Well, hold on. What's the technological?
All I see happening on ETH is people building L2s, which are designed to work exactly like Solana works as an L1. Like, if I think about like all
but Ran, I think you're missing the point. Hold on, Ran. I think you're missing the point, because the communities that are on Ethereum or on Solana or on Bitcoin aren't on these networks only because they're superior tech. They're there because they've got their community, because there is a sort of framework of system that they believe in. I mean, Bitcoin, don't tell me that Bitcoin technology scales faster, better than Solana, right? That's not about that. Right?
Yeah, you're a smart guy. I rate you as one of the smartest guys in crypto. I want to know, and you're definitely one of my favorite KOLs. I'll tell you that much. You're definitely one of my favorite KOLs in crypto. Yeah, right alongside BitBoy, who's also a KOL, just for the record. But I mean, if you were a dev and you were going to develop an application right now on crypto, what would be the reason why you use ETH? Why not just build it on Sui or Solana? And I use that because
So the reason why, for instance, if you're a gaming project and you want to launch an NFT, it's still one of the largest volumes and networks that you can build from in terms of selling your NFT. There's a customer base that you can generate revenue from, right? So it's not just about the technology; it's about basically the business opportunities that come from that, right? It's kind of like saying, hey, just because the tax rate is high in Switzerland, we shouldn't build businesses on that. There's more money that you can make in Switzerland because there's more revenues or people that have more money in those networks because, you know, the individual user on Ethereum has more buying power, for instance, right? So I don't think we can compare it purely on the technical side. The reason why Ethereum is here to stay, I mean, remember, you know, 3 or 5 years ago, every sort of L1, L2 was talking about being the Ethereum killer. They're not talking about that anymore because actually the growth of Ethereum does help the ecosystem broadly. They will start with Ethereum because it still has, you know, deepest liquidity. You can launch a project, whether it's gaming, whatever, and then they might move to an L2 and migrate from there. But its roots and its beginnings do start often from the Ethereum ecosystem.
But
they are essentially the branch.
You know what? If I look at, let's say that there's an amount of money that is earmarked to be invested in crypto. Okay, so let's say that the amount of money is $10 billion and it's being invested in crypto worldwide. It feels to me like 5 billion or 8 billion of that money is going into building layer 2s or building applications that make Ethereum more scalable so that Ethereum can perform like Solana already performs. And then the balance of the money, the small amount of the money, is being invested in projects that actually are going to get adoption of this technology. And so I think, like, why I'm asking this is because I haven't seen a great ETH project for a long time. I mean, you could argue maybe EigenLayer is a great ETH project because it allows restaking and resecuring of assets, but I haven't really seen like much usage of ETH networks lately other than for L2s. And maybe I'm wrong. I see maybe in your VC KOL world, maybe you guys are seeing amazing applications of ETH, but all I'm seeing is people building more and more L2s and bringing $10 billion FDV things onto the market. Yeah.
So, okay. I think there's implicit in your question. I feel like there's a bunch of things that you're glomming together that should be teased apart. So for one, what's very clear is that Ethereum is the most valuable real estate in the smart contract universe, period. Now, if you are building something in the most valuable real estate, right? Like this is your, you know, this sort of Fifth Avenue in New York City, okay? You're not going to build a popsicle stand on Fifth Avenue, right? It just doesn't make sense. If you're going to build a popsicle stand, you're going to go do it out in the suburbs where real estate is cheap, and you know a bunch of kids are going to be around to buy your popsicles. So in the same way, if you're building like a kind of a fancy new fangled consumer app that might work, might not work, some cute new idea, some social viral phenomenon, you're not going to do it on Ethereum. It just doesn't make sense. The economics don't work for you. You're going to do it on Base. You're going to do it on Solana, on some place where there's lots of retail and it's very, very cheap to try things and see whether or not they work. Now, we are seeing huge numbers of users right now on Base and on Solana in terms of retail investors. But if you look at the quantum of capital that's available on those chains, it is an order of magnitude lower than what is available on Ethereum, right? Ethereum right now has something in the order of $80 billion of TVL, whereas, you know, Solana and Base are each on the order of about 4 to 5 billion, if I'm not mistaken, which is, you know, 1/20th the amount of capital that's available on Ethereum. So you go to Ethereum, right? Why do you go to New York City? The answer is because the richest people in the world live in New York City. And if you want to sell this stuff to the richest people in the world, that's where you go. Now, there aren't that many people who are the richest people in the world. And so as you were telling us earlier, you know, in South Africa, there's 4,000. Okay, well, so that's a small addressable market, but each of those users is worth a lot of money, right? If you go to Aave has a huge amount of TVL. It's one of the largest TVL protocols on Ethereum. Actually doesn't have that many users in absolute terms, but it doesn't matter how many users they have, because you don't charge money in terms of users. You charge money in terms of total amount of borrows and loans. And the amount of capital matters much, much more than the total number of users who are interacting with Aave, or at least, you know, Aave on Ethereum. Aave is obviously multi-chain at this point. So the way to understand Ethereum is that it's the most valuable real estate in crypto. Now, the fact that, you know, if you're building something, depends on what you're building, whether or not it makes sense to be on Ethereum or not, right? If you're going whale hunting, then okay, you want to be on Ethereum. That's where the whales live. That's where the TVL lives. That's where the capital lives. But if you're building something that requires you kind of more like social media, where you have, you know, millions, tens of millions of users, and you're charging each of them a very small amount of money, yeah, that's not the Ethereum business model. That's not going to make sense to do in Ethereum, right? You can't go to market in one super expensive city if you're charging everybody, you know, $2 a head. So that's why I think you see more of these consumer applications, as you mentioned, not being built on Ethereum anymore. But that doesn't mean that Ethereum is somehow irrelevant or it's a dinosaur now. It's just a different creature than
what's
what you see out of
what's the most exciting thing that you've seen built on ETH recently?
I mean, recently it's certainly EigenLayer, right? EigenLayer now is the #1 TVL protocol in crypto, period. So EigenLayer is probably it's probably a perfect example of the kind of thing that fits on Ethereum, which is extremely large, extremely capital intensive, something that really only is, we just heard the story about Justin Sun having a huge airdrop because of all the capital that he's putting into EigenLayer. That's the kind of thing that Ethereum excels at, is relatively small number of users, very large amount of TVL, and it's mostly a money and a scale game, more so than it is a, mass consumer market type game.
Jordy, what do you think? Should I hold my ETH or should I just let them go?
Yeah, there's a huge difference between like the price of the asset and like the usage of the chain, and I think the price of the asset. These things are so reflexive and they're so belief and community kind of sentiment driven that you get this like downward spiral, and people just keep selling because, like you said, people are giving up. Like they're the guy who's like feeling dead, and like they just want to get out because it's so much suffering. It's so much pain. I mean, ETH is still up on the year, right? Like it's not that bad. I mean, it's up a decent amount. Nothing like Bitcoin, let's say. But I think the thing we're realizing is that when there's not a lot of revenue and these things are kind of just trading on like meme and monetary premium, whatever you want to call it. Sentiment plays such a large role, and we need to hit the bottom where somebody just says, okay, this is too cheap. Like I want to buy this now. Like, and then you kind of start getting like reflexivity back up where everybody starts looking at each other, and the Ran KOLs of the world just start getting on shows and saying like, guys, I'm gonna get back in ETH. I'm really excited. Like it looks like it's back. Like
but hold on. If I were to say to you, okay, listen, I'm giving you $10,000. It's your mother-in-law's money, so it's really important money not to lose. If you want to keep your seat at the family table, like you don't want to mess with the mom-in-law's money, but you have to invest it into one layer one, and you're going to be holding that one layer one for 12 to 18 months. So what until the end of the cycle, if you believe in the cycle theory. And I mean, where do you put the money? I mean, would you dare put the money into ETH, or would you rather put the money into something else? Like,
you put it in ETH, you restake it, you get your 10% on top, so it kind of like makes you feel slightly better about the pain, and you don't have to worry about unlocks. I mean, there's still people selling, like I said, from ICO, but even Solana, like even just the next token right after, has huge unlocks coming next year. I mean, like I'm the only one talking about it. I barely hear anybody talk. I mean, I love Solana, a great thing, everything fantastic. But you look at March 2025, which is only like 5 months away. There's multi billions kind of getting unlocked, and it doesn't get much better from there. So I love tokens that
you're putting your mom-in-law's tokens in your money into ETH, and you're staking them for 10%.
Yeah. And I do a little prayer just to hope that you don't.
Yeah. So, Ran, I think the way that maybe that we would think of it is really around Web3 is an entirely new wealth class for the most part, right? So people are generating wealth from Web3 don't come from the traditional forms of wealth. And so there are certain type of assets we think that over time will themselves gain value just because they have status from the community construction of it. Right. So Bitcoin is certainly one of them, right? Meaning that, in the future, if 1 billion people are on chain, right, then, owning one Bitcoin is going to be a status object, and the other one I think is going to be Ethereum because it has that sort of, it's a godmother, shall we say, right? It's a godmother sort of ecosystem that basically birthed EVM, right?
Your mom-in-law's money is going into which token?
Well, if you're going to give it that way, then, it's long-term, not 12, 18 months. Then I think Ethereum's not a bad one. And I certainly hold a lot of ETH.
I want to touch on something Jan said. It's actually very relevant. Like he mentioned the word status. And I do think that ETH is suffering a little bit from a status coolness factor. Like it's got the status of the boomer OG, but does it have status with the kids? 𝗲𝗄, are you down with the kids? Do you know what the kids are into? Because
I am known as a down with the kids KOL, so I can speak to this.
I mean, okay, so I mean, even after Vitalik sang in Japanese on stage, you still think ETH is not cool?
Okay, well, singing aside, right? Singing aside, I think to Jordy's point, it's not that I think that I agree with you that Ethereum doesn't have the same coolness factor as some of the new tokens that are launching. That's certainly happening. But I think as that group matures over time, right, and basically looking towards sort of getting, let's call it, the status of their peers in the network, they're going to gravitate towards something like ETH and Bitcoin ultimately, right? They end up becoming essentially the thing that you trade in and trade out of as well. So I don't think that will go away. I think Ethereum has achieved that kind of status where it will maintain that. And I think because there is a steadiness that comes, the new players coming in will not have seen the kind of volatility that other people have seen over the last 4 years, for instance, right? So I think there's going to be that element as well. Standing the test of time is equally important. And by the way, I think tokens like Solana are starting to demonstrate that as well over time, and therefore people believe and come into that ecosystem the same way. But I think Ethereum already has that status.
Yeah, the other thing that I'd point out, so let's take a step back and kind of look at fundamentals to the extent that this industry has fundamentals. What are the fundamentals of Ethereum, right, or of a layer one currency? What actually makes it valuable? I'd say there are basically two ways that a layer one currency are valuable. One is going to be a subject of the total amount of fees that are burned, which is usually correlated with the amount of MEV that's available on a blockchain. And if you look at that, take Ethereum, take Solana, you've seen that lately they've been pretty competitive with each other because Solana just had so much meme coin trading activity that has contributed a lot of MEV. But Ethereum has had that basically forever, right? To the extent Solana is now they've recently come on the stage because of the velocity of meme coin trading that's happening there. But we don't know whether or not it's going to sustain to next year, to 2 years from now, 3 years from now. With Ethereum, there's no question that level of trading activity and that level of MEV that we've seen on Ethereum, it's not going away, right? There's just too much money on Ethereum for that to possibly go away. And on some level, the fact that the block times on Ethereum are longer actually mean that there's more MEV on Ethereum net just because there's kind of, block time is basically dead time, during which there's more arbitrage, there's more liquidations, there's more all sorts of other stuff that the miners are going to be able to capture. So from that perspective, okay, Ethereum, very healthy in the amount of MEV that's going to be available there. The second part of what makes a layer one currency valuable is the extent to which it circulates in the economy, right? So you can sort of think about, okay, a country is valuable because, think of the dollar. The dollar is valuable because you can pay taxes in the dollar, and so the tax base of the dollar matters. But the second thing that matters is how many dollars are circulating in the world. How many other countries are using dollars? How many people are using dollars to settle trade? So if you think about Ethereum, ETH is used broadly across all the L2s. We talk about, the L2s are parasitic, but the reality is that they're using ETH as the base currency on almost all of these layer 2s, whether it's Base, whether it's Arbitrum, whether it's Optimism, whether it's any ZK chains, all of them are using Ether. And Ether even gets used on other chains that are not EVM based. So the extent to which you see that's not happening for any other currency to anywhere near the extent it's happening for Ethereum. Both of these two elements are very strong. The trend lines are all in the exact direction you'd want to see, which is that MEV and transaction fees remain very high, and the amount of the sort of internationalization of ETH is more than any other asset that you see within smart contracts. So the question really is, okay, what is the bad thing that's happening to Ether that seems to be dragging it down? And the answer, as everyone is saying on the stage, it's vibes, right? The vibes in Ether are bad. People don't feel good about, nobody's shilling the Ether price. They're shilling every other currency underneath the sun, but somehow there's no one around to shill Ether. When Vitalik posts one meme, everyone gets really excited. To me, this sounds like a very temporary phenomenon.
Maybe you should sing a little less.
You look back on. Yeah, it's the kind of thing you look back on in 2 years and say, okay, well, that didn't really matter. That was totally irrelevant to the long-term story.
Okay, but hold on. So, Jordy, when we spoke about selling my ETH into Celestia, you said to me, don't do it because of the token unlocks. And you brought it up again when we spoke about it now. So maybe that brings me on to the next topic, which is, is there something systematically wrong with our market in that we created this token unlock model? We thought we were being smart by limiting token supply so we could get high valuations. And now everywhere you look, there's just tokens raining from heaven. It's like there's just more token unlocks after more token unlocks. Systematically, is this market broken systematically? Because, for this market to go up, what you're basically saying is that you need to bring in more new money than there are unlocks happening every day. And I think I saw a chart of the unlocks. I don't have it in front of me, but the chart of the unlocks just looks absolutely crazy. More of these high FTV projects coming onto the market. with more unlocks. Like, is there a fix for this? Is there a fix for this?
You're right. Like, there's a fix, but like it is fundamentally broken because you're taking retail individual investors in a new asset class that's not being studied. There's no textbooks. There's no university courses. I mean, there are, but like not about, you know, what token to buy. So you're taking something that is not well educated or well understood by even like, you know, sophisticated, you know, VCs and everything. It's like, it's so complicated of a concept. And then you're asking them to like figure out what's the fair price given this unlock schedule over the next like 4 years. What should be the price now? And what's the forward, like, they have no idea. They're not thinking about it. They're just like, oh, it was yesterday, it was 1, now it's 110. Maybe it'll go to 150. Like, you have a complete mismatch. And, you know, Bitcoin at least is at a stage where the inflation is low. ETH is at a stage where the inflation is low. As soon as you go further down, I mean, BNB, I think the reason why BNB has done so well is also like the tokenomics are, I've seen them getting praised lately as like very good tokenomics. And indeed, I do like the BNB tokenomics because, you know, they buy and burn and then they give you airdrops. So kudos to what they've done. Obviously, it's super centrally held, and you know, it's a very centrally held token. But some good elements. You can see that there's ways to possibly do things. I'm not saying everybody should do like stake for airdrops. I think we had a couple projects do that this cycle, and people got really excited. So Celestia
was one of them. Dimension was another one of those. You know where both of those tokens are at the moment.
It's like the Russian doll. Like you open and it's like a smaller one, and then like each time it gets diluted into like less and less kind of like next airdrop. And I think Eigenlayer is so late to the game that I'm not sure how the AVS airdrops are gonna get hyped. I think like a year ago, AVS airdrops were quite hyped. We'll have to see if it's kind of sustained.
Okay, so I mean, is it Hasib? What do you think? I know you're smiling because you've been this like, you know, big anti-VC, and you know everyone's been anti-VC. You've been like, no, the VCs are the good guys here. And this is not about VCs versus others or KOL VCs versus others. This is more about.
Well, you're a VC KOL. Why are you talking shit about me?
No, I mean, so is there something systematically broken with this market? Because again, the way I see it, there's so many unlocks happening every day that it means there's more supply coming onto the market. Unless you're getting demand that can buy up that supply in the short to medium term, who buys the tokens? There's no one buying the tokens. So, I mean...
Yeah, so, okay. Well, a few things I would say. One, it really sounds like Jordi has no confidence in markets. And I'm kind of like, you know, I thought in crypto we're all supposed to be libertarian. We're all supposed to like believe in economic efficiency. I believe in markets. I think markets work. I think markets work even if, the people who are buying them, there's a lot of people who are retail investors. There's some people who are the sort of schizos on Reddit who are creating models and actually trying to figure out what these things are worth. And the beauty of markets, they don't require everybody to be doing that in order for them to work and to be able to price assets efficiently. Now, the reality is that these things are startups. And startups, if you had a mark to market on a startup every single day, you would also get a lot of volatility. There's a reason why we don't traditionally do that in venture. And if we did, we'd probably have stronger stomachs for it than we seem to in crypto land. My view on these things, for the most part, is that like lockups. First of all, the idea that we should abolish lockups is actually something that 𝗏𝗁 𝗬𝗏 has been saying for quite a while. That we should just have everything on lock day one, team, investors, everybody, just free for all the moment that a project goes live. I think that's obviously terrible. I think that's actually, we played this back once during the ICO bubble, where a lot of projects had actually zero lockups. And it was a disaster. It was just absolutely terrible. And we relearned the lessons of TradFi is that, hey, lockups are there for a reason. They solve an alignment problem. There's a reason why you want to be buying things that the people who created it believe in and are economically aligned with. That does a lot of work in terms of creating good outcomes for projects. Now, that being said, if you look at traditional equities, right, you see the same phenomenon is that over time, the stock ownership rotates from being the insiders and the original investors to being a diversified set of people who bought it on the stock market. That happens for everything. It's normal. Now, not everything goes up. And that's important to say, because I think, for some reason in crypto, we just are appalled when tokens go down. Most startups fail. Most projects don't end up making it. Most things that people believe should happen in the world don't end up happening at precisely the moment or the first team that comes along and tries to build it. That's okay. Part of what you get when you're buying, risky token, crypto, blah, blah, blah stuff is that you are taking the risk that this project might not succeed, right? If you don't want to take any risk, go buy Bitcoin. Bitcoin is very safe and nobody's worried that Bitcoin is going to explode. But almost anything else in the space, like, yeah, it's a question mark. So now look, if you end up being right, and you buy the Solanas of the world, or the few projects that end up being huge breakouts in the cycle, it pays for all the other stuff you own that doesn't work out. But I don't think we should be appalled at this idea that, hey, you bought some really risky startup on page 2 of CoinMarketCap, and what do you know, it went down in price. That's absolutely normal. And as a VC, I'll tell you, that's most of how our investments go, is that most investments don't make money, but the investments that do make money pay for the things that don't.
Yeah, what do you think? I mean, is there something fundamentally wrong with the market? Is there like a structural issue with the market and this thing called lockups that we created? I mean, these lockups don't exist in any other market. So, I mean...
No, I disagree. To 𝗬𝗢𝗄's point, I mean, even when you take a company public, founders, for instance, are locked up, which is basically what sometimes they mandate as rules, basically to demonstrate alignment. So I don't think, I think there's a reason that exists. But, I think the real question for me is really around, if you have conviction in something, then it doesn't really matter where it trades in the short term, as we have seen in this space, right? If you look at, for instance, over a horizon over 3 or 4 years, if you can have a conviction in the projects that you like and they do well, you're doing fine. And to 𝗬𝗢𝗄's point, there will be projects that fail. Many of them will do that, right, as they do in real life for a sort of, let's call it, traditional business. But, when you are sort of trading, that's different, right? So if you're trying to sort of trade the moment, you're trying to find, okay, is it this month, this moment, this time, right? That's a totally different game. And, I'm not really qualified to talk about that because that's not how we play the market, right? But actually, I think it's much easier to play it long, because actually, and if you want to have some fun, that's fine. But the reason playing long, I think, works for us because we can actually analyze and research and double down on the things that we think are interesting for us. Of course, we do get it wrong. But I think, by the way, this is the other point around why I think the institutional VC backing, and by the way, there's differentiations as well. Not every VC can, for instance, buy liquid tokens, but some can that are only in the market. The institutional aspect is important, really, because I think the role is only around research and analysis to help people understand why there's conviction behind the project, which, when you've got millions of meme coins floating around, it's, we're kind of losing the element of actually, why is there a fundamental thought behind this? And why is this critical? And what's the long-term play? Because we're actually sort of, like the conversation here seems to be driven around, well, why isn't it up now? God damn it, right? Hold on a second. Are we here just for the next month? Or actually here because we want to build something for the next 10 years and 20 years? And if we think about it from that lens, I think our investing perspective changes a lot as well.
So when you invest in something, do you look at the FDV or do you even look at the token unlock schedule? Or is that not something that you pay attention to? Because if you're a long-term investor...
No. So yes, the token unlock schedule does matter, not necessarily from the perspective of sort of how it unlocks matters, but not from the perspective of the token supply, but from the intention of the token, right? So meaning that you can tell a lot about a project in how the tokenomics is designed, in terms of how the founders or the teams are thinking about it. It's kind of like a playbook, right? It's your business plan of a certain type. And there are certain elements around maybe, and by the way, some projects make sense to have a complete unlock or a big one because of the nature of that project. So in other words, we can't say, hey, every sort of, low float, high FTV project is bad, or every project that basically unlocks everything on day one is bad. That's not how it works, because every project is different, serves different type of projects. I mean, let's take an example. You couldn't do something like that, for instance, for a certain type of deep in projects, because there's physical infrastructure you got to pay for.
You got to pay for,
right? Yeah, exactly. So there's elements around that that doesn't make sense. You can't just say this is a cookie cutter model that applies for everything. I will also say, by the way, that there are narratives around that sometimes suit certain other parties as well, right? I mean, do you remember, this is trading, unlike other areas of business, are not as adversarial. Trading is adversarial, right? So if I'm a trader on the other side, basically, I don't like the fact that the VC is coming in at a better deal. I don't like the fact in the short term that he's going to sort of, potentially sell on my position. So I'm going to try to fight that. And though, and it's good to have the conversation, because again, not every project is like that, but we can't blanket say this is true, because the unlock mechanism is also a way to let the project basically establish itself over time.
Before you release the value. Before you release the value.
Well, because remember what you're doing, you're building network effects, right? Yeah. So for instance, I'm using the value of my network that the VCs can't unlock, for instance, right away, by giving it to the end users of a certain value that might appear inflated, but they benefit from it because they get they reward them to build value in the network as is, right? Because otherwise it might become too diluted, right? And VCs and founders will agree to have a long unlock to let that happen, because actually a high FTV, low float actually benefits the builders in the ecosystem over that period of time, where they benefit of the greater value that they're earning, as opposed to complete unlocks on day one, where really everyone suffers. As an example, right? And so, for instance, if a VC says, you know what, we're happy to have a five-year lockup because we want to give most of the high value to our users. Why is that a bad thing, right? So again, I think we're sort of twisting one story for a narrative when there's a lot more to analyze there. It's again not one size fits all.
All right, guys, amazing. Listen, we are completely out of time. In fact, we went over time today. Love you guys madly. Thank you to the amazing KOLs for all the opinions that you gave us here today, and all the alpha that you gave us here today. To you guys on the Banter fam, we will see you guys again on Sunday. Remember, Sunday we've got our big meme show again on Sunday. Until then, trade well, my friends.